Hi everyone. So I want to say happy Lammas, happy Lughnasah to everyone. And then I want to get into this video. I've tried this video, I don't know, 10 times now, maybe 15. I completely lost count. I've tried for hours now. So hopefully this works. I'm going to talk about Thumb, Thumbelina, and I'll probably hold off on Tinkerbell for another video. And it'll probably end up being a three-part discussion like our last discussion on the fair folk. Tom Thumb was is a story that was collected by the Brothers Grimm from the German peasantry. And it is basically, the idea is that there is a childless couple, an elderly childless couple, that adopts a fair folk being. The way the story goes generally, and there are many different versions to it now. It's been around for a very, very long time. But the way it generally goes is that the elderly couple is sitting before a fire, either the hearth fire or a campfire, and they are discussing their lives together and all the joys that they've had, and that they don't regret anything, but that they wish that they would have had a little child or a little boy. And it seems that one of the fair folk had overheard this. So yeah. Um, the fair folk tend to take things quite literally, so when they wished for a little child or a little boy, that's exactly what they end up getting. Um, Also, it varies, but what happens is they are approached by a fair folk woman or an enchantress or a good witch, and um, witches and fair folk seem to be interchangeable in many different fairy tales and folk tales, and I find that very interesting, um, since witches are often said to be fairy touched. So witches themselves are often seen as magical beings that aren't human, aren't completely human. They are human but not. Um, so they're often interchangeable with the fair folk in these stories. So we could say that the witch is a kind of fair folk. Um, but anyway, this magical feminine being either comes to the door, or very fortuitously the elderly woman meets her somewhere. Just going about her own business, she meets this magical being, and this being presents her with a grain seed. It's either a wheat seed or corn corn grain or barley corn. Um, it's almost always a grain, and it says, "Go plant this in your garden and tend to it, and make sure nothing bad happens to it. Keep pests away from it. Water it. Take care of it, and then on the full moon or one of the equinoxes or one of the solstices, one of the significant times of the month or of the year, um, it will flower, and then it will bloom, and look inside the bloom of the flower, and you will find a surprise." So she takes the fair woman's advice and takes care of this plant and it grows and grows, and then a flower comes up, and it's just a bud at first, and it looks very much like a tulip. So from a grain seed comes a tulip. So it's definitely not your average kind of plant that we have here. It's not something that would normally happen. And after some time, the full moon comes or the solstice comes, and that night the flower opens, and the old woman looks inside, and there is a little man inside. no bigger than the length of a thumb. My thumb's kind of small, so it'd probably be a man's thumb. But anyway, he's not very big at all. He's one of the very little people, and pretty much immediately he goes off on adventures. Um, he's kind of mischievous, like the fair folk are. He likes to get into trouble. He's very brave, even for his small stature. He is extremely adventurous. He's kind of a daredevil, and the stories can go on and on and on about the adventures he goes through. Uh, Sometimes he faces giants, sometimes he vanquishes dragons, sometimes he gets swallowed by field mice and other rodents, and um, sometimes he even there's a very particular one that I wanted to mention. Oh, it doesn't really matter. But he goes through all kinds of, oh, one time he did get baked into a pie. I wanted to say that. Um, yeah, so there are all different kinds of troubles that could happen to him, like just being around the kitchen and around the house. He has to be careful with the oven, all kinds of adventures because of pests, mice, rats, um, squirrels, all kinds of little, what we would consider little forest creatures, but to him they're rather big. Um, if you have seen the movie The Adventures of Timothy Green, he is, I think, a modern day Tom Thumb, because he is essentially planted in the garden, and then he grows and he comes up out of the earth, and then he eventually returns. And I do believe that Tom Thumb eventually returns to the other world, but first he goes through countless adventures, and people are still making up stories about different adventures that he goes through. Um, Thumbelina is a story that was pretty much created by Hans Christian Andersen, and she is essentially a feminine version of Tom Thumb, except there are elements to her story that are a little bit different than Tom Thumb's story. Um, Tom Thumb at one point becomes a knight, um, like a warrior knight, and, and goes through that experience of different quests, like slaying dragons and slaying giants. Um, but with Thumbelina, um, it starts with a widowed woman. So there is no elderly man, but a widowed woman who's completely alone, and she makes pretty much a desperate plea with one of the fair folk women. She is very deliberately requesting that she be given a one of the fair folk to come in to be adopted into her house. So it's not by mistake, it's not by miswording a request. It is a very deliberate, I would even accept someone that is no bigger than a thumb. So this is what she gets by request. Very explicit request. Um, and she is given a barley corn and told to plant it, and it does become this tulip type flower, and inside there is this little woman, and she goes through her own adventures, but it actually does have a set plot because it's not really that old. Um, Hans Christian Andersen wrote it in the 1830s, I think 1835 or 36, and he took many of the adventure elements from Tom Thumb, and he took many other elements from different fairy tales. So his is a, a, a remaking of previous fairy tales. It's not completely, like, he didn't just make it up, but he's using elements of fairy tales that are hundreds, if not thousands, of years old. Um, first, Thumbelina, who is also called Little Tiny, as a nickname, Little Tiny, meets a frog, because, you know, every maiden in a fairy tale has to have her frog. Tries to capture her and make her his bride. If you've seen the movie, it's all of the elements of the movie are there in the story, but there were some elements left out. Like, at one point she makes friends with a fish, like a magical fish that, like, grants wishes, and at another point a robin falls in love with her and, like, follows her to the end of the story, and has fallen in love with her and is taken up with her. There is also the sparrow, but they do not meet until the winter, when she mends his wounded wing that he got caught on a branch. So that part is there, except that the sparrow doesn't show up until pretty much near the end. If you haven't seen the movie, I'm sorry, this is going to be a spoiler. She does marry the Fairfolk prince at the end, and she gets her own pair of wings and a name. And instead of Thumbelina, they named her Maya, M-A-I-A, which is from the Greek myth of the Pleiades, the constellation the Pleiades. It is one of the spirits of the Pleiades, one of the nymphs, or I don't know what you would call her. And she's not a naiad, she's not a dryad, but she is associated with the Pleiades constellation. You might call her a devalued goddess, but generally she's considered to be one of these beings that are between the divine and human. So to me, she has always been a fair folk lady, a little lady. She was never human, but she was adopted by a human mother. So there is this idea of a changeling type situation where the fair folk child, or sometimes even elderly man or elderly woman, because some of the fair folk age backwards, kind of like Benjamin Button. But anyway, they come and are adopted by a human family, and the difference here is that these are requested. These are wishes, petitions that people have made for a child to come to them, and they get fair folk children, magical beings as children. I kind of love these stories. Okay, so so she meets a frog, and then she meets a beetle, and then basically these are small animals that we tend to not like, or that tend to be troublesome to us. And the whole story is about finding out what love really is for her. That's her adventure. For Tom Thumb, it's learning about what being brave means. Not that Thumbelina is never brave. There are situations where she does have to take care of herself and show some measure of self-confidence in confronting some creatures that are kind of not pleasant toward her. But she does have friends, which when Tom Thumb tends to face things pretty much on his own. And I don't know if that is kind of like a gender problem, that's a gender bias that's kind of been carried through this story for a couple hundred years. Um, 1835 is not a whole long time ago, but it's long enough for further back in time that there were very strict ideas about what feminine virtue was and what feminine characteristics were, and women were not generally considered to be or expected to be very brave and very out there and very capable of taking care of themselves. Um, Thumbelina does show some initiative in taking care of herself that um, probably would not have been very popular or something that would be very common in stories of the time. But today she's kind of like she needs help from her friends, and today she might be viewed as more of a, I don't want to say a damsel in distress, because she can deal with things when she needs to on her own, but she does seem to need more assistance from companions, from uh, enchanted fish, from uh, swallows, from from different animal beings. Um, and I think there is some significance there that she does not have human friends, that she has animal friends. And there's probably even some significance to the specific friends that she makes and to the animals that she has to confront. Like with the frog, there is the theme of the princess and the frog. Um, and I'll probably deal with themes in fairy tales at some other point, because right now I just want to talk about the fair folk. So getting back to it, um, she is Maya. The the I'm gonna say she's a devalued goddess, because that's what it looks like to me, especially since she's associated with celestial bodies, this constellation of the Pleiades. I know that's not a historical Greek perspective on it. She is this kind of being that is in between the divine and human, is the historically accurate um, idea. But to me, she might as well be a goddess. Um, so she marries the fair prince in the end, and I don't believe that he is actually named, or if he has been named, then I missed that part. I'll look it up, and if I see that he has a name, I'll put it in the description. Her name is Maya. Um, she gets her wings, and then she is reintegrated into the land of the fair folk. So I kind of appreciate the whole idea of the fair folk being adopted into human families, um, just because of my own spiritual beliefs about the connection between this world and the other world. And I like also that it is not a case of kidnapping where a human child is replaced with a fair folk being, um, because that to me is I I'm uncomfortable with that idea. I'll say that. Um, yeah, I'll say that. And I think that's it. Now, this is about 20 minutes long, so I think I've covered enough about Thumbelina and Tom Thumb. Um, and I don't think that they are the only stories where the idea of the changeling is played with so that um, it's more of a mutually beneficial situation. But I like the change, that there's not the insinuation of a kidnapping in these stories. Um, so yeah, those are two of the little people archetypal um, beings. Um, I'm not saying that they don't exist. I'm just saying that these particular two are archetypal because their stories have been told for um, long periods of time, while we don't necessarily have the names of all the fair folk and know all their stories. So they kind of stand in for all of the little people. Um, that's it. So I'm going to say all stars shine on your paths, and this will probably be the last video today because my computer has been crazy, but I will try to get one up over the weekend, and hopefully I don't lose my internet connection. If I do, I'm not going to be able to for a while. I'm having really spotty connection recently, but if I can, I will have another video up this weekend. Okay, so all stars shine on your paths, and I hope you've had a wonderful Lammas Lughnasah. Um, if you want to tell me about it, tell me in the comments what you did, or if you want to link me a video, if you want to say I put up a video about something I did for today, then I would be interested in that, because I'm always interested in what people do on this particular day, because I'm never really comfortable with figuring out what to do today. I did get the opportunity to go outside for a little while. It wasn't very long, and I did do some meditation with some crystals, and I went out to my garden because this is, I believe, first harvest day. I had some green peppers that were growing, and I have like little cherry tomatoes, and I have rosemary and some basil and different herbs. So I collected a little bit of that today, which I think is appropriate for today. Um, okay, I'm really done now. All stars shine on your paths, and bye.